"Your beach house and car are already sold," she said, just like that, as if we were discussing the weather or a bag of groceries. I held the phone to my ear, not sure if I'd misheard. Maybe the line cut. Maybe I imagined it. But her voice was clear, cold, efficient. No trace of guilt, no tremor. Just words dropped like stones into a well that had already run dry. "Abigail," I said, my voice quieter than I expected. "What are you talking about?" "I told you weeks ago we were looking into options," she replied, with a sigh I knew too well. That sigh that meant, "Don't be dramatic, Mom. The market is hot. We got a great offer for the beach place. The car, too. I had to act fast." The beach place, the car, as if they weren't mine. As if I hadn't bought the house with your father's pension and my own savings. As if I hadn't scrubbed the salt off those windows every spring, baked peach pies in that tiny oven, hung fairy lights from the porch railing every Christmas. As if I hadn't slept in that house alone for 12 summers since he died, listening to the waves and wishing someone would call. "I never agreed to sell anything," I said. My hand trembled slightly, not from fear, but something else, something heavier. "Well, technically, you did," she said. "You signed the paperwork last year, remember? The power of attorney. You wanted to simplify things. We talked about this." Did we? A soft crack of memory surfaced. Abigail at the kitchen table, a stack of papers. "Just standard stuff," she'd said. "In case of emergency." I'd been tired. It was the week after my hip surgery. I hadn't read anything closely. I'd trusted her. She was my daughter. "You told me it was for medical emergencies," I said. The quietness in my voice now came not from confusion, but from clarity. "You said it was just to talk to my doctors." She didn't answer right away. Then, "Look, what's done is done. The buyer's already signed. The car's at the dealership. We'll transfer the proceeds to your account. It'll be easier for you. No more maintenance, no more driving. You don't need that big place anymore. Or that car." I looked out the window at the stretch of ocean, gray and restless under the September sky. My house sat just beyond the dunes, pale blue siding weathered from salt and time. The Camry, old but solid, sat in the gravel driveway. A bucket and sponge still leaned against it from when I last washed it 2 days ago. "You don't get to decide what I need," I said. "Oh, come on, Mom," she snapped, the mask slipping. "I'm trying to help. You don't even lock the doors. You're out there all alone. One slip on the stairs and no one would know. This is for your safety." "Safety?" I repeated. "Or convenience?" Silence. Then a sharp exhale. "I knew you'd react like this." I let the silence stretch. I wanted her to feel it, to feel the weight of what she'd done. "I'm coming down there tomorrow," she added. "We'll pack what's necessary. You'll come back to Tampa with me. Stay in the guest room until we figure out next steps." The guest room. The one with no windows and a futon that smells like her cat. The one where she stores her husband's hunting gear and bins of Christmas decorations. "No," I said. "Mom, don't be stubborn." I said no. She sighed again, and then that familiar tone returned. Flat, cool, managerial. "Suit yourself, but the closing is in 3 days. You'll need to vacate before then. I've already arranged movers." She hung up without saying goodbye. I sat still for a long while. Not crying, not panicking, just still. The way you go still when something inside you shifts, not breaks but rearranges, like furniture moved in the dark, and your toe hit something that didn't used to be there. I stood up. My hip ached, but I ignored it. I walked out onto the porch. The boards creaked under my feet. A sound that used to annoy me, but today felt like a hymn. I leaned on the railing and looked out at the sea. This place wasn't a luxury. It was my life. My last gift from the man who'd once said, holding my hand, "Let's get a little place by the water, somewhere quiet." Quiet. Yes. Until today. I walked back inside and found the manila folder in the bottom drawer of my desk. Financial records. The bank manager's card. My old lawyer's number, still written in pen from a time when things were simpler. I placed it on the kitchen table. Then I opened the drawer where I kept the spare keys. Abigail had forgotten something. Her brand new red SUV was parked at the back of the driveway. She'd left it here last weekend after our lunch, claiming she needed my car to drive into town because hers wasn't handling sand well. She hadn't taken the key with her. I stared at the key fob in my palm. She sold my car, but hers was still here. And suddenly, I knew what I was going to do. I didn't sleep that night. The wind off the water howled like it hadn't in weeks. Old gusts rattled the porch swing against the siding. In the dark, the house creaked and sighed around me. Like it, too, was restless. I sat in my armchair, a thin blanket across my knees, and watched the shadows shift across the wooden floor. This house had never felt lonely before, not even after Sam died. He passed in the guest room with the window cracked open, sea breeze on his face. It had been his wish to leave this world in the place he loved most. And afterward, when I was alone, I didn't flee. I stayed, because it was still ours. We bought it when I turned 43, our anniversary gift to ourselves. The girls were grown, and Sam had just retired early from the Navy after 30 years. We were finally going to live the quiet life we'd talked about in letters and dreams. This little cottage, with its crooked porch and weather-stained shingles, had been the start of that promise. I remember the day we got the keys. Sam lifted me over the threshold like we were newlyweds again. He said, "This place is going to grow old with us." And it did. We repainted the kitchen together, a pale butter yellow that never quite matched the catalog, but felt like home. We hosted Thanksgivings here, birthdays, New Year's Eve parties with neighbors who've long since moved away or passed on. Abby's wedding rehearsal dinner had been in the backyard, under strings of borrowed lights and mosquito netting. There was a picture of that night still on the fridge. Abby in her ivory dress, Sam standing behind me, both of us raising glasses. She was smiling at something her fiancé had said, her face lit up like a girl who had the whole world ahead of her. Back then, she used to call me Mama. She used to laugh with her eyes, before the city, before the career, before the bitterness settled in like dust you stop noticing. A lot changes in 20 years. But this house held its shape, even as everything else shifted. I rose slowly, my joints stiff from the chill, and turned on the kitchen light. The bulb flickered before warming to its usual amber glow. I stood there, staring at the cabinets, the counter, the ceramic cookie jar in the shape of a pelican. Sam bought as a joke, and I never had the heart to toss. All of it. Still here, still mine. For now. She'd said 3 days, that movers were coming. Like I was some tenant overstaying her welcome. I opened the drawer where I kept bills and statements. Every month, I paid the taxes. I paid the water, the gas, the trash. I'd paid off the mortgage over a decade ago. Abigail had never contributed a dime to this house. Not even when she was between jobs and stayed here for 6 months with Nora, using every towel in the linen closet and never once washing a dish. And now she'd sold it. Just like that. The power of attorney. I remembered it now. She'd brought it in a manila envelope with that same rushed voice she used when she didn't want questions. It's just a precaution, Mom. Everyone does this now. Just in case. And I'd signed it. Because she was my daughter. Because I trusted her. How foolish. But that wasn't the worst of it. No. The worst was how easily she'd spoken to me on the phone. No hesitation. No sorrow. Just a done deal. Like I was a burden she'd finally managed to box up and label. Mom, miscellaneous. To be stored or discarded. I turned toward the hallway and walked slowly, my hand brushing the wallpaper that Sam and I had put up ourselves in the first spring. Little faded seashells and coral branches. He'd hated wallpaper. Swore it was the devil's work. But he did it for me, and he'd smiled the whole time. I passed the bedroom, our room, and paused at the guest room door. The one she said I could have, in Tampa. No windows. A twin bed. Temporary, she'd said. Just until we figure things out. Figure what out, exactly? Where to store me? I returned to the kitchen, poured myself a glass of water, and stood at the sink, staring out at the backyard. The moon was hidden behind thick clouds, but I could just make out the old bench by the dunes. That's where Sam used to sit at dawn, with his coffee and the newspaper, long after he lost interest in the headlines. I hadn't been out there in a while. Not since my last fall in April. But I opened the door now and stepped outside, barefoot on the cool wood of the porch. The air smelled of salt and pine. The surf was steady and deep, a whispering rhythm that had soothed me through grief and loneliness and every sleepless night. I walked out to the bench, my knees aching, but I made it. I sat down slowly, the wood damp and gritty beneath me. I looked toward the dark line of the ocean. You wouldn't have let her do this, Sam, I whispered. You'd have stopped her cold. But Sam was gone, and I was the only one left to fight. Only I hadn't fought. Not for a long time. I used to be a woman who ran a classroom full of third graders for 30 years. I could command silence with one look. I managed PTA bake sales, recitals, my husband's deployments, and my mother's decline with equal grit. But somewhere between the funerals and the quiet dinners for one, I'd gotten small. Careful. Too polite to push back. Until now. Now, something was waking up inside me. I stood up, brushing sand from my palms. The wind whipped my robe around my legs, and I felt the cold sting my cheeks. But my mind was clear. The house wasn't gone. Not yet. I had 3 days, and I planned to use them well. The next morning, I put on my best sweater. The cream one with the wooden buttons that Sam always said made me look like a lady with opinions, and brushed my hair until it lay smooth against my scalp. No makeup, no perfume, just me, and a sense of purpose I hadn't felt in years. I didn't bother with breakfast. The only thing I needed was the manila folder I'd laid out the night before. Bank records, property deeds, the copy of the power of attorney Abigail had left tucked into one of her organizing folders, the ones she always brought when she came for visits that felt more like inspections. I slid the folder into my tote and grabbed my purse. The air was thick with coastal fog, the kind that clung to your bones. Abigail's SUV sat in the driveway like a trophy, sleek and smug in its gleaming red finish. I looked at it once, just once, then turned to my own car. Still there, still mine, for now. The engine coughed to life with the familiar grumble of an old friend waking up. I reversed slowly, not looking back at the house until I reached the road. When I did, it hit me all over again. This wasn't just a house. It was memory. It was love layered into the walls. And it was under threat by the very person I'd once cradled through a hurricane, rocking her in the bathtub as the windows shook and the power went out. I drove straight to town. First stop, the bank. The lobby was quiet, except for a young woman at the counter who smiled politely. I asked to speak with the branch manager. "Of course," she said. "Do you have an appointment?" "No," I replied, "but I believe he'll want to hear what I have to say." After a brief wait, a man named Mr. Devlin came out to greet me. Late 50s, careful eyes, a tie with tiny anchors on it. Probably thought it gave him character. He led me to a small glass-walled office. "What can I help you with today, Mrs. Mason?" I laid the folder on his desk and opened it slowly. I'd like to understand exactly what powers this document gives my daughter. He took the power of attorney and adjusted his glasses. "This is a general, durable power of attorney," he said. "It grants broad authority, financial decisions, property transactions. As long as you're deemed mentally competent, she can act on your behalf at any time." I stared at the paper. But I never meant for her to sell my house. "Did you sign this of your own free will?" he asked gently. "Yes," I said. But I wasn't told what she could actually do with it. She said it was for emergencies, medical decisions. He nodded slowly. "Unfortunately, unless you were coerced or mentally incapacitated, the document is legally binding." My stomach turned. "So she can sell everything I own?" He hesitated. "She can. But you can also revoke it." That word, revoke, rang like a bell. "I want to," I said. "Right now." He tapped his keyboard, then reached into a drawer and pulled out a form. "We'll need to notarize your signature. You'll also want to inform your lawyer and anyone your daughter might have contacted. Realtors, banks, title companies." I signed. My hand didn't tremble. When it was done, he looked at me more closely. "You're not the first to go through something like this," he said. "People give power of attorney without realizing how much power they're handing over, family or not." I nodded. I didn't trust my voice just yet. From the bank, I drove to the only lawyer I still knew in this town, John Pierce. He was nearly retired, kept an office above the bakery, and still wore suspenders like they were going out of style. Sam and I had done our wills with him years ago. He remembered me, offered coffee, closed the door behind me, and waited as I explained. When I finished, he leaned back and said, "You did right to revoke the power of attorney. That's step one. Can I undo the sale?" "That depends," he said carefully. "You said she signed a deal with buyers?" "Yes, that's what she told me. But I haven't signed anything, haven't seen a contract. If you're still the legal owner on paper and the sale hasn't closed, there may be time, but we'll need to act fast. And find out who she's working with." He helped me draft a formal revocation notice and typed up letters to send to local realtors and title companies. If she's using a firm in this county, we can stop it cold. I stood to leave, then paused. "She said movers are coming in 3 days." He nodded grimly. "We'll make sure they have no legal right to cross that threshold." I walked out of that office lighter than I'd entered. She'd signed the papers. She'd made the calls. She'd pulled strings behind my back. But I wasn't helpless. Not anymore. I wasn't going to beg her. I wasn't going to cry. And I wasn't going to sit in that windowless guest room while the life I built got stripped away like old wallpaper. If she wanted to treat me like an obstacle, she was about to learn I was made of stronger things than she remembered. My hands might be older now, but I still knew how to hold my ground. I didn't go straight home. After leaving John Pierce's office, I drove past the grocery store, past the pharmacy, past the row of little shops that once felt like a second neighborhood. The streets looked the same as they always had. Sleepy, sun-faded, familiar. But I didn't see them the way I used to. Not today. I kept driving until I reached the overlook at Harbor Bluff, where the land drops off suddenly into sky and sea. Sam used to bring me here on Sundays. We'd sit in the car with coffee cups balanced on the dashboard, saying very little, just watching the waves. I pulled over, shut off the engine, and let the silence settle around me. The ocean stretched out like a truth too big to grasp. I stared at it for a long time. Part of me still couldn't believe she'd done it. Abigail, my daughter. She'd taken the keys to my life, the house, the car, the bank, and turned them one by one until I was locked out of everything I'd built. I should have seen it coming. She'd been circling my independence for years, chipping away at it in small, polite ways. "It's too much house for you, Mom. You shouldn't be driving that far anymore. Wouldn't it be safer to move closer to us?" Always wrapped in concern. Always with that sharp smile that never reached her eyes. When Sam died, she took control of the funeral arrangements before I could say a word. When I had surgery, she flew in and reorganized the kitchen for efficiency. When she talked about me, it was in the same tone you use for old pets, fond, but with the faint whiff of inconvenience. Still, I gave her the benefit of the doubt. She was my daughter, my only child. But now I knew better. I started the car again and drove back into town, this time with purpose. At the post office, I mailed John's letters. To the real estate agencies, the title company, the escrow firm. Every envelope sealed tight with my initials written over the flap. From there, I stopped at the hardware store, bought 2 new locks and a set of window latches. The clerk, young, polite, with inked hands, offered to help me carry them. I declined. "Got it," I said. Just like always. He smiled, but didn't argue. When I got back home, the late afternoon sun slanted across the porch, warm and low. The wind had settled. Everything looked calm again. Too calm. I stood for a moment before going inside. Then I got to work. First, I replaced the deadbolt on the back door. It took longer than it used to. My fingers don't grip the same. But I did it. Then I went around the house checking every window. I fixed the broken latch in the bedroom, wedged wooden dowels into the sliding glass door, and pulled every curtain shut tight. By the time I was done, the sky had gone lavender. The kitchen smelled faintly of dust and metal. I poured myself a glass of water and sat at the table, looking at the mess of tools, receipts, and documents in front of me. I wasn't just holding ground now. I was laying traps. The revocation was filed. The notices were out. The locks were changed. But I still had to be ready. Because she would come. Not today, maybe not tomorrow, but soon. She wouldn't go quietly. She never had. My phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. "Mrs. Mason, this is Tanya from Gulf Coast Moving Services. We're scheduled to arrive Thursday at 9 a.m., just confirming access to the property." I stared at the screen, rereading the words. "Access to the property." I typed a reply. "Access revoked. The move has been canceled by the owner. Any attempt to enter the premises will be treated as trespassing. LM." I pressed send and watched the little bubble disappear. Then I blocked the number. Next, I opened the folder again and looked at the list of expenses from the past year. Quiet money flowing in one direction. School payments for Nora. Car insurance for Abigail's husband. A new water heater for their house in Tampa. dozens of things I'd paid for, automatically, without even noticing. I made a note to cancel every one of them tomorrow, not out of cruelty, out of necessity. I wasn't an ATM. I wasn't a fallback plan. I was a person, a grandmother, a mother, a woman who had paid her dues and then some. As the light faded, I turned on the porch light and stepped outside. The wind was gentler now, carrying the scent of low tide. Across the street, Mrs. Henderson watered her hanging plants, her back slightly bent. She waved, and I waved back. We'd always been neighbors, not close, but constant. It hit me then. This town, this street, this porch. They were part of who I was, not something to be tidied up and sold off like clutter. Abigail didn't just try to sell a house. She tried to erase me. And now she was going to learn what it felt like when someone refused to disappear. I went back inside, closed the door, and locked it. Twice. The house was quiet, but not helpless, and neither was I. The next morning, I returned to the bank. Not because I doubted Mr. Devlin, but because I needed to see it for myself. The paper trail. The exact moment when my daughter had decided to make a move without me. Not just emotionally, legally, financially, permanently. The lobby was busier than yesterday. A young couple argued quietly near the loan officer's desk, and someone behind me tapped impatiently at their phone. But I waited without hurry. When the receptionist saw me, she offered a polite smile and whispered something to the manager. He appeared moments later, gesturing for me to follow him. "Back again already, Mrs. Mason?" he said. "I need to know when she started," I replied. "Not just the power of attorney. I want to see what she did with it, what was moved, what was signed, dates, times, all of it." He led me to a small conference room this time. Quiet, windowless. He opened a laptop, typed quickly, and pulled up my file. "She contacted us 3 weeks ago," he began. "Requested a wire transfer authorization for $68,000. Labeled it as proceeds from property sale, though we didn't see a title attached." I stared at the screen. She requested that under my name? She used her authority through the POA, and yes, your name was on the form. He hesitated. It was digitally signed. My mouth went dry. I'd never used digital signature platforms in my life. I still signed checks with a ballpoint pen and licked every envelope shut. But somehow, my signature, or something that passed for it, was on a legal transaction. She forged it. She used her authority, he corrected softly. Legally, that distinction is murky, unless you pursue fraud. I looked down at my hands. These hands that had written every school permission slip, paid every medical bill, signed every support check since the day Abigail was born. Hands that had held her fevered forehead, taught her how to drive, clapped at every recital. And now she'd used a mouse click to erase them from her version of the story. "Do I still have time to stop the transfer?" He nodded. "Yes, it's still pending in escrow. But you'll need to submit a notarized revocation, which we already have, and file a formal objection to the transaction. I can print the form now." He left the room and came back with a packet of papers. I signed everyone, pressing hard, as if the ink itself could carry my anger. Before I left, he paused. "Mrs. Mason, I don't mean to overstep, but I see this sometimes. Children who blur lines, convince themselves they're helping, or that they're entitled. They don't always realize the damage until it's done." "Oh, she realizes," I said. "She just doesn't care." He didn't argue. Outside, the wind had picked up again. Sharp, sea-salted, cutting through my cardigan. I walked slowly to my car and sat behind the wheel, my hands resting on the steering wheel, unmoving. Abigail had always been efficient, strategic, a planner. But I never thought she'd turn that ability toward dismantling the life I built. Not until I saw my name, twisted, borrowed, signed without consent. And in that moment, something hardened inside me. Not bitterness, not even sadness. Resolve. She'd used my trust against me. Now I would use her underestimation. It came back to me that evening. Not in a flash. Not like in the movies where some hidden memory suddenly lights up the dark. No. It returned slowly, like a tide creeping in over forgotten sand. The kitchen light hummed faintly. My tea had gone cold in its cup, untouched. The house was quiet, except for the tick of the wall clock and the distant shush of the waves. I sat at the table, pen in hand, pretending to make a list of errands. But I wasn't writing. I was remembering. She'd come a week after my hip surgery. Abigail. Hair perfect, lips glossed, voice just soft enough to seem caring. She brought flowers, the expensive kind that smelled like nothing. She stood in the doorway and scanned the room the way she always did, eyes flicking over counters and corners as if she were evaluating damage. "You're lucky it wasn't worse," she'd said, brushing crumbs from the table like they offended her. "A woman your age, a fall like that. It could have ended differently." I'd nodded. The pain pills made me slow, agreeable. Then she brought out the folder. "I've been thinking," she said. "We need to simplify things. For your sake. Just in case something happens again." I remember how she sat close, too close, and placed the papers in front of me. The legal jargon blurred in my vision. Durable power of attorney, medical directive, financial proxy. "It's all standard," she said. "Everyone's doing this now. It doesn't change anything day to day. It just protects you if something goes wrong." She touched my hand then, smiled just the right amount. "Mom, I don't want to have to fight hospitals or banks when you're lying in a bed and can't speak for yourself." That part I believed. I wanted someone I trusted to speak for me if I couldn't. Of course I did. She handed me a pen. I signed where she pointed. I didn't read the fine print. I didn't ask questions. I didn't call a lawyer. Because she was my daughter. And because, God help me, I was so grateful she had come. Those weeks after surgery had been lonely. Nora was away at college. My neighbors offered casseroles, but no conversation. The nights were worst. I hated asking for help, hated the way my body moved, clumsy, slow, aching. When Abigail stayed the night, I thought, she's here. She cares. But she wasn't here to help. She was here to prepare. I remembered, too, how she'd stood in my bedroom the second morning, arms crossed, assessing my old dresser. "You know, if you ever wanted to downsize," she'd said lightly. "Some of this stuff could sell for decent money. That vintage look is in." She said it like a compliment, like it was a kindness. I'd laughed then, tired but amused. She wasn't joking, she was taking inventory. I looked at the date on the copy of the POA again. April 17th. 1 week after my surgery. 1 week after I trusted her enough to leave the front door unlocked and the checkbook on the kitchen counter. She hadn't used it right away. No. She waited. Waited until my guard was down. Until my habits resumed. Until I forgot what I'd given her. And now, with that single document, she'd nearly erased me from my own life. I set the paper down and folded my hands in my lap. They looked smaller than I remembered, older, but they were still steady. She took advantage of my pain. She counted on my silence. She mistook my love for weakness. But I wasn't the woman I was in April. I'd healed. And she had no idea what that meant. John Pierce didn't say much when I walked back into his office the next morning. He just looked at me over the top of his glasses, nodded once, and gestured to the same worn leather chair I'd sat in earlier that week. "I take it you remembered something," he said. I didn't bother with small talk. I signed that power of attorney under medical stress. She came when I was recovering from surgery. I was on painkillers. I didn't understand what I was signing. He studied me for a moment. "And you're prepared to say that in writing?" I just did. He gave the faintest smile. "Good. That opens a door." He reached for a thick legal volume behind him and laid it on the desk with a soft thud. "There's precedent in this state," he said, flipping through the pages. "Power of attorney agreements can be challenged if they're signed under duress, coercion, or diminished capacity. The trick is proving it." "I don't have medical records," I said. "Not of that specific day. But you were recently post-operative, on medication. It can be enough to raise doubt." He handed me a notepad. "Write a sworn statement, as detailed as you can. Everything you remember from that visit, what she said, what she brought, what you felt. No dramatics, just facts." I took the pen and began writing. My handwriting had changed over the years, shakier now, more deliberate. But the words came easily. I wrote about the painkillers, about Abigail's tone, her timing, her pressure. I wrote about how I trusted her, how I didn't ask questions, how she slid the paper in front of me like it was a formality, nothing more. When I finished, he read it silently, nodding now and then. "This," he said, tapping the paper, "gives us leverage. At the very least, it slows everything down, forces her hand. No one wants to close on a house when there's a legal storm coming." I exhaled, tension I hadn't noticed easing from my shoulders. He leaned forward slightly. "Now let me ask you something, Lauren. What do you want to happen next?" It was a good question. Did I want to press charges? Make it public? Cut ties completely? I looked past him, toward the window. Outside, a bird hopped along the sidewalk, pecking at crumbs someone had left behind, moving carefully, deliberately, taking what it needed. "I want her to stop thinking she can take things from me just because I'm quiet," I said. "I want her to feel, for once, the weight of a decision she made behind my back." He nodded slowly. "Then we'll send her a formal cease and desist. Let her know the POA has been revoked, that you're challenging the legality of any transactions made under it, and we'll file a temporary hold on the house title." "Will that stop the sale? If the buyer hasn't signed?" "Absolutely. If they have, well, they'll panic. No one wants to buy property tangled in a family dispute. It buys us time, and time buys you options." He slid the notepad into a file folder, then looked at me more softly. "You're handling this with more grace than most." "I'm not angry," I said. That surprised even me. But it was true. "I'm disappointed, deeply, but not angry." He smiled faintly. "You don't need anger to fight. You need clarity. I've got that now." As I stood to leave, he said one more thing. "Lauren, you may not want this, but if it comes to it, you can sue her for breach of fiduciary duty." I turned back to him. "You think I should?" "I think she thinks you won't." That stayed with me all the way home. It wasn't about revenge. I didn't want to see Abigail punished. I didn't want courtrooms or headlines or lawyers talking over each other. I just wanted her to understand something she never seemed to grasp, that I wasn't hers to manage, that this life, mine, was not a contingency plan or a piggy bank or a project to be streamlined. It was mine. And I had no intention of giving it up. That afternoon, I made one more stop. The bank, again. I was becoming a familiar face there, and I didn't mind. Let them see the old woman in her cardigan, walking steady and speaking clearly. Let them remember that not all customers with gray hair are confused or passive. Some of us know exactly what we're doing. I asked for Mr. Devlin, and within minutes I was seated in his office, the same glass-walled room where I'd first learned just how far my daughter had gone. "I'd like to take full control of my accounts," I said. "You already have, technically. The revocation of power of attorney is active." "I mean more than that," I said. "I want to cancel every automatic transfer, every recurring payment, anything set up with Abigail's name attached to it. I want to revoke any shared access, any alerts to her number. All of it." He blinked, then nodded slowly. "We can do that." It took almost an hour. Line by line, transaction by transaction, we combed through the record. There were more than I expected. Recurring tuition payments labeled N. Mason College Aid. Auto insurance for a vehicle not registered in my name. Utilities linked to a Tampa address. 2 monthly transfers of $500 labeled only as family discretionary. I'd approved some of these over the years, quietly, willingly. That's what mothers do. But I realized now, she had grown used to it, comfortable with my generosity, dependent on my silence. Every time I wrote a check or nodded at a request, I had reinforced her belief that it was all hers for the taking, that I would always say yes. Today, I said no. Mr. Devlin printed out a full summary of the changes. I read it over twice before I signed the bottom. Then, without looking up, I said, "One more thing. I want a new account. Separate. Under a different name." He glanced up. "You want to move your funds?" "Not all of them, just enough. I want to create a clean slate. No past fingerprints. No family connections. Something she'll never find." He nodded again, more firmly this time. "We can do that too." He helped me open the account. A modest one, in a name that included my middle initial and a mailing address I hadn't used in years. My parents' old P.O. box, which I'd kept alive for no reason other than nostalgia. I transferred just enough to cover a few months of expenses. Quiet money, quiet protection. By the time I walked out of the bank, the sun was low and golden, painting the sidewalks in long stripes of light. I held the new account folder in one hand and my old leather purse in the other. I felt still, not triumphant, not vindicated, just still, like a pendulum that had finally stopped swinging. Back home, I made tea and stood at the kitchen sink, staring out at the sea. It looked different now, not distant, not symbolic. Just what it had always been, wild, unpredictable, constant. My phone buzzed on the counter, a number I didn't recognize. I let it ring. A moment later, a voicemail appeared. "Hi, Mom. It's Abigail. I heard from the title company. They said something about a revocation. I'm confused. Can you call me back? We need to talk. Please." I didn't press play. I didn't need to. I placed the phone face down on the counter. Then I walked through the house, slowly, carefully, turning off lights, locking windows, drawing curtains. As I moved from room to room, I touched what was mine. The quilt I'd sewn in '92. The book Sam never finished. The seashell Nora gave me when she was 6. things you couldn't list on a deed, things no one could transfer. The next morning, I would call the moving company and cancel. I would send another notice to the escrow office. I would draft a letter to the college, redirecting Nora's tuition. I would do all the things that needed doing. But tonight, I would sleep. Because everything that mattered, my name, my rights, my story, was back where it belonged. With me. The car was still there. Red. New. Gleaming like a trophy parked at the edge of my gravel driveway. She'd left it there the week before, said it didn't handle the coastal roads well, claimed her husband needed my car to get into town because it was lower to the ground. I didn't argue then. I rarely argued with Abigail anymore. It just wasn't worth it. But now, with everything undone and rewound, I saw it differently. Not a favor, not convenience, just another quiet transaction made in her favor, without ever asking what I thought of it. I stood at the window for a long time, watching the way the afternoon sun caught on the windshield. The house was still. My tea sat cooling beside the sink. Outside, the neighborhood was quiet. The only sound the distant hum of waves and the lazy flap of laundry on Mrs. Henderson's line across the street. Then I remembered the drawer. Second one by the phone. The same place I kept stamps and address labels and that old pair of reading glasses I never got around to replacing. I pulled it open slowly, and there they were. 2 sets of keys, one to my Camry, gone now, sold behind my back. And the other, on a leather loop that read, "Adventure Awaits," the kind of trinket you'd find at a boutique in some over-air-conditioned shopping center in Tampa. Abigail's keys. I picked them up and stared. This was the car she bragged about. Fully loaded, she'd said. Leather seats, smart navigation, hybrid engine. Took 6 months to order. She'd waved the keys around like a baton when she first pulled into the driveway with it, Nora in the passenger seat, looking vaguely embarrassed. And she left it with me. Not on purpose. No, Abigail never left anything valuable by accident. She thought she had time. Thought I'd be out of the house soon. That the movers would show up and she'd pull into the driveway and collect it with a sigh and a smile and say, "Oh, right, I forgot." But now, things were different. The power of attorney was revoked. The house wasn't selling. The accounts were closed. And her brand new, unpaid-for car was parked on my land with the title in her name. But the keys in mine. I walked outside barefoot. The gravel pressed into the soles of my feet, but I didn't care. The car beeped when I approached. The mirrors unfolded like wings. I opened the door. It smelled like new leather and expensive perfume. There was a half-empty bottle of sparkling water in the cup holder, a phone charger dangling from the console, and a pair of sunglasses perched neatly above the visor. Everything in its place, just the way she liked it. I sat behind the wheel and shut the door. The silence inside was perfect, padded, soft. Then I pressed the button. The engine came to life without a sound. I tapped the touchscreen. A soft glow lit up the cabin. Navigation, climate, Bluetooth. Everything blinking and waiting to be told what to do. I didn't drive it, not yet. But I sat there for a long time, both hands on the wheel, letting the thought settle in. She took my car, sold it like it was her right. Well, now her car was mine. At least for a little while. A week ago, I would have felt guilty for thinking that. I would have called it petty, immature, unbecoming of a woman my age. But now, I called it fair. I shut off the engine, stepped out, and locked the door with a quiet beep. Then I slipped the keys into my pocket and went back inside. Some debts aren't paid with money. Some messages don't need words. And sometimes the only way to be heard, really heard, is to take up space someone else thought was theirs. The phone rang just after 9, a soft trill, almost polite, cutting through the quiet of the evening. I didn't recognize the number at first. Florida area code, but not Abigail's. I almost let it go to voicemail. I'd grown used to silence. But something nudged me. I picked up. Hello? There was a pause, then a voice I hadn't heard in too long. Grandma? My breath caught. Nora, I said. Hi, she said quickly. I hope it's okay that I'm calling. I got your number from the college forms. Mom's been hard to reach. I sat down at the kitchen table, suddenly lightheaded. I'm glad you called. She hesitated. I could hear rustling in the background, maybe her dorm room, a window being closed, the shuffle of papers. Is it true? She asked finally. About the house? What did your mother tell you? She just said you were moving in with us, that it was safer, easier, that you were struggling to keep up. I closed my eyes. That word, struggling, clung like smoke. Nora, I said gently. I wasn't struggling. I was managing. Quietly, yes. Alone, often. But managing. What your mother didn't tell you is that she sold my house and my car without asking. There was silence. Then a sharp breath. What? She had power of attorney. I signed it last year after my surgery. I didn't understand what I was signing. She used it to take control of my finances, my property, everything. She said you wanted to come live with us, that you didn't want to be out there anymore. No, I said, calmly, clearly. She wanted that. Not me. Nora's voice dropped to a whisper. Oh my God. I didn't fill the silence. I let her sit with it. Then more quietly, she asked, Are you okay? I paused. Yes, I said. Now I am. She was quiet again, but it felt different this time. Not disbelief, not denial, but processing. I could hear her thinking. I had no idea, she said. She never said a word. I thought you were, I don't know, ready to slow down, ready for help. There's a difference between help and control. I know. She sounded older suddenly, less like the girl who used to beg for ice cream before dinner and more like a woman who'd just seen behind a curtain. I don't want you to feel like I was part of this, she said. I wasn't, I promise. I know, sweetheart. I'm so sorry. I'm not angry at you. She let out a breath, shaky with relief. I looked out the window. The red SUV still sat in the drive, gleaming faintly under the porch light. A car for someone who needed to be seen. Abigail always did. Are you still at school? I asked. Yeah, she said. Midterms this week. Mom was supposed to visit, but now everything's kind of off. I smiled, sad and small. Well, you have a place to stay here if you ever need it. The door's still open. I miss that house. So do I. She was quiet again. Then, what are you going to do? I thought about that. I'm going to protect what's mine. Quietly, but fully. And when the dust settles, I'll decide what stays and what doesn't. Good, she said. Then, with a gentleness that caught me off guard. You don't sound weak, Grandma. You sound strong. I am. The line went soft again. Then, her voice. I love you. I love you, too. We said goodbye without dragging it out. I put the phone down and sat for a moment in the stillness. Not broken. Not shaken. Just clear. One person had tried to take everything, but one had called to say she saw me, And sometimes that's enough to keep going. I heard the tires on the gravel before I saw the car. Not hers. Mine. Or what used to be mine. The old Camry. It pulled into the drive with a sputter, dust kicking up behind it. A second later, the door slammed, and then she appeared at the edge of the porch, lips pressed tight, eyes shielded by oversized sunglasses. Abigail. I didn't rise from the porch chair. She climbed the steps like someone who wasn't sure if she was welcome, but wasn't about to ask. I noticed she wore heels. Impractical for the boards, but she always dressed like she was on her way to a meeting. Even here. "I called," she said. "You did. You didn't answer." "No." She took off the sunglasses then, slowly, like it was meant to be dramatic. Her eyes looked tired, or maybe just exposed. "What's going on, Mom?" she asked. "You canceled the sale? You froze the accounts? You sent letters to everyone. I don't understand." "You do?" I said. She crossed her arms, that old defensive stance. "I was trying to help." "Help?" I repeated. "You emptied my life behind my back. You signed the power of attorney." "I did. Under pain medication. Under pressure." "You know I didn't understand?" She looked away, jaw clenched. "This isn't how we do things," I continued. "Not in this family. Not with lies. Not with silence." She took a step closer. "You were alone. You were falling. You were forgetting things. I had to do something." I stood. I was healing. I was grieving. I was quiet. That's not the same as helpless. Her face twisted, just slightly. "You make it sound like I stole from you." I looked her straight in the eye. "You did." She blinked. "Just once." "I gave you everything I could," I said. "Money, support, space. I watched Nora while you rebuilt your marriage. I paid for your emergencies. And I never once asked for anything back. That's not fair, isn't it?" She didn't answer. Just stood there, arms wrapped around herself now, like she suddenly noticed the wind. I pointed to the red SUV parked in the back of the drive. "You left your keys." She followed my gaze. "I was coming back for it." "I bet." "I didn't think—" "No," I interrupted. "You didn't. Or maybe you did. You assumed I'd go quietly. That I'd pack a bag and thank you for stripping me down to what was convenient. I didn't mean it like that. But you did it like that." She looked down at her shoes. For the first time, she looked small. "I didn't know you'd fight back," she said softly. There it was. The truth. That's what she counted on. Not malice, not cruelty, but my silence. The years of yes, the decades of swallowed thoughts, the tired gratitude she mistook for agreement. "You don't know me as well as you think," I said. We stood in silence. Somewhere beyond the dunes, a gull cried. The sun hung low behind the house, throwing long shadows across the porch. I could smell the sea. I always could before a storm. Finally, Abigail spoke again. "What now?" I didn't answer. Because I wasn't sure. Because that wasn't her question to ask anymore. She followed me into the house like a guest who'd lost her invitation. Didn't say a word about the porch light I'd replaced last month, or the scent of lemon oil on the wood floors. Didn't comment on the empty hooks by the door where her jacket used to hang during winter visits. She looked around like someone surveying damage, but there was none. Only the absence of control. I went to the kitchen, put the kettle on. Not for her, for me. Abigail stayed by the doorway, arms still crossed. "I didn't expect this," she said, quieter now. "Any of it." "That's the problem," I replied. "You never expect me to push back. You expect me to hand things over, nod, Step aside. That's how it's always been. She opened her mouth, then closed it. I sat at the table. If you came to apologize, I said, I'll listen. But if you came to explain, I'm not interested. I lived the explanation. She leaned against the wall. I panicked. After your fall. After the hospital. I didn't know how to help from far away. So you decided I couldn't manage, that you had to manage me. I thought I was protecting you. No, I said calmly. You were protecting your idea of me, an old woman who needed simplifying, who needed to be repackaged and stored. The kettle clicked off. I poured the water, dropped a tea bag in, and let it steep. She didn't move. I want to fix this, she said. I looked up. You can't. Her face dropped. Then what do you want from me? I let the question sit, then answered. I want honesty. I want my name off anything you've attached it to. No more tuition routed through me. No more bills in my name. No more surprise calls from title companies asking when I plan to vacate my own home. She nodded slowly. And I want space, I said. Not punishment. Not estrangement. Just space. To live the way I choose. To decide what's enough and what's mine. She swallowed hard. And the car? She asked, glancing toward the driveway. It's still yours, I said. I haven't touched it. A beat. But you left it here, like a woman leaving her purse at a table she didn't plan to return to. Don't do that again. She looked away. I stood. I'll say this once, Abigail, and I won't repeat it. You don't have to take care of me. But you do have to respect me. She looked older, somehow, in that moment. Not wiser, just smaller. Okay, she said. I hear you. I didn't ask if she meant it. I didn't need her to promise change. I needed her to see what change looked like, standing right in front of her, steady, unshaking, unwilling to be rearranged again. The tea steeped in silence. And for the first time in a long while, it was my silence. She left without another word. No hug, no parting smile. Just a nod, the soft click of the door and the sound of her heels retreating down the porch steps. I didn't watch her walk to the car. I didn't need to. The house was still again. I stood in the center of the kitchen, both hands on the back of a chair, and let the silence settle. Not the empty kind. The right kind. Earned. Mine. The clock ticked on the wall. The kettle had cooled. Outside, the sky was beginning its slow turn to dusk. That gentle blue-gray that always made the house feel like it was exhaling. I walked slowly from room to room, not to inspect, not to check, just to feel. In the hallway, my fingers brushed the edge of the picture frame. Sam on the back deck, barefoot, holding a fishing pole like he didn't know how to use it. He never caught a thing, but he loved the ritual of it. Just like I loved the ritual of this house. Everything in here had been touched by years, not trend. The worn armchair in the living room with one stubborn spring. The bathroom cabinet that always stuck halfway closed. The back screen door that slammed if you didn't catch it gently. Sam used to say, "This house has moods." He was right. It had mine now. I sat on the edge of my bed and looked around. Same bedspread, same nightstand, same book half finished on the pillow. But the weight was gone. That pressure of being watched, managed, assessed. The feeling that someone else was always 2 steps ahead, trying to decide what part of my life could be optimized next. She thought she was doing what was best. But that's the trouble with people who think they know better. They forget to ask if you even need saving. I walked out onto the back porch, the breeze tugging gently at my sleeves. The sea was calm tonight, not dramatic, not wild, just steady. I sat on the bench Sam built, the wood smooth under my hands. It creaked a little, the way my knees did, but it held. The grass was patchy in places. The fence needed repainting. One of the porch lights had started to flicker again, but none of it felt like decline. It felt like living. A slow, imperfect, beautiful living. I closed my eyes. For the first time in months, I didn't feel like a burden someone was calculating how to carry. I didn't feel like a line on someone else's spreadsheet or a story told to friends in a tired voice. I felt like myself. Still here, still whole, still home. The car sat there for 2 more days. She didn't come for it, didn't call, didn't send someone else to retrieve it. Just left it like a half-finished sentence, waiting to be completed or quietly erased. I didn't touch it. I didn't even open the door again. But I looked at it every morning from the window. The red paint gleamed in the sunlight. It had barely known rain, barely known dust. A car bought for image, for status, for movement. And now it was still. It would have been easy to keep it. A kind of justice. Quiet, clean, elegant revenge. She took mine, I took hers. But something in me resisted the symmetry. Not out of softness, no, not anymore, but out of clarity. I didn't want to own something that still had her hands on it. I wanted space, real space, not filled by her silence or her shadows. So on the 3rd morning, I called a tow service, asked for a flatbed, gave them her name, the VIN, and the address in Tampa, paid cash. The man who arrived, sunburned, polite, loaded the car without questions. When he left, I watched the red taillights disappear down the road and felt nothing but stillness. The driveway looked better empty. That afternoon, I opened the closet in the guest room. The one she said I could have, temporarily, the room with no windows. I pulled out the box she'd left behind last year. Old receipts, a pair of shoes, a half-used candle with the wick burned sideways. I carried it out to the trash. Some things didn't deserve ceremony. Inside, the phone was quiet. Nora texted me once, asked how I was holding up. I replied simply, "Clearer than I've been in years." She answered with a single heart. Later that night, I sat with my checkbook, made a list. Who still had access to what? What I would change. Not out of paranoia, just out of peace. I set new passwords. I changed the locks again, this time with deadbolts. I picked myself at the hardware store. I closed the last credit card with her name as an emergency contact. Called the college to confirm that Nora's tuition would now come directly from her own account. Not mine, not anymore. Every step was quiet. Not reaction, not punishment, just decision. That's what people don't always understand about women like me. We don't yell when we're done. We don't throw things. We just close doors, clean counters, turn off the porch light, and let silence finish the sentence. When I was done, I made a cup of tea and stood by the window. The house was clean. Not perfect, but mine. The driveway was empty. Not lacking, just free. I thought about what came next. Not in the dramatic way people do in novels, but in the way a woman my age does when the dishes are done and the room is quiet. Maybe I'd take the bus into town again. Maybe I'd buy another used car. Something modest. Something with a little rust around the edges. Maybe I'd plant something in the yard this year. Let the neighbors see that I wasn't going anywhere. That the house hadn't changed hands. That the old woman still had her keys. I wasn't starting over. I was continuing, without apology, without noise, just forward. There's something about early morning light that makes the truth easier to sit with. It slips in slow, soft around the edges before the world gets noisy again, before the headlines and phones and someone else's opinion of who you should be starts to press in. I've come to love that time of day. That's when I write my lists now. Not of chores, but of small choices. I write down what I'll do, not what I should do. The difference may sound small to you, but to a woman like me, it means everything. Yesterday, I took the bus to the farmer's market, wore my blue sweater, the one with the missing button I still haven't sewn back on. I bought fresh peaches, firm and fragrant. A young man offered to carry my bag. I let him. We walked 3 blocks and didn't speak once. It was lovely. When I came home, I made cobbler. Ate it warm, barefoot, standing by the kitchen window while the sun dipped low behind the trees. I didn't think about Abigail, not in the way I used to, with hurt or confusion or that heavy mix of guilt and anger that keeps you awake at night. I just let her be who she is. And I let me be who I always was, underneath the quiet. No one calls to ask if I'm sure I want to stay in the house now. No one questions my driving or rearranges my spice rack or says things like, "Wouldn't it be easier if," as if ease was the goal. Let me tell you something. Ease is overrated. What I've built here wasn't easy. Marriage wasn't easy. Motherhood wasn't easy. Waking up after loss and making coffee anyway? Not easy, but real. And I'll take real over easy every time. I didn't press charges. I didn't take Abigail to court. John Pierce asked if I wanted to. Said we had a case, a strong one. I told him I didn't want a battle. I just wanted my name back, my place back. And I got both. Sometimes the best justice is simply staying where someone tried to erase you. Nora calls me every week now. We don't talk long, just enough. She tells me about her classes, her friends, the professor who talks too loud. I listen. I don't fix. I don't advise unless she asks. I just give her what I was once so willing to give everyone else but myself: space. Last Sunday, she said, "You sound different, Grandma." "I am," I told her. "I'm home." She didn't answer right away, and that was all the answer I needed. I've learned that not all victories come with applause. Sometimes it's just a woman sitting on her own porch, sipping her tea, knowing she doesn't owe anyone an explanation for why she stayed. This house has creaks and drafts and paint peeling on the north side. But it also has light. It has memory. It has roots sunk deep into a life I built, inch by inch, with hands that held more than anyone ever noticed. I almost gave it up. Almost let someone decide I was too much trouble, too much space, too much cost. But I didn't. I stayed. And if you've read this far, if you're still here, in my quiet, steady story, I'll tell you something I wish someone had told me sooner. You're allowed to stay, even when they try to move you, even when they smile while signing papers behind your back, even when the ones you love make you feel small so they can feel big. You are still yours. You're not a problem to be solved, not an asset to be shifted, not a chapter to be closed early. You are the whole story, and you have every right to keep writing it. So don't go quietly. Don't pack your bags just because someone says, "It's time." Don't let them call it care when it's control. Don't let them call it love when it's fear. Stay. Speak. Lock the doors if you must. Change the passwords. Cut the cords. And if it helps, If it strengthens your spine in the early morning light, think of me. Still here, still steady, still mine. If this story moved you, if you saw something of yourself in these words, leave a comment. Share it. Let someone else know they're not alone, because we're not done, not even close.